Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out, the latest edition of ReFLEXions, our weekly look back at the action from the boxing weekend. No better place to start than Liverpool, well-known fight city, of course, and we saw Anthony Fowler reignite his career with a 10-round points win over Ruiz, which nominally took place at middleweight, but both guys only scaled in a couple of pounds over the light middle or super welter limit, so that's where we expect their future to be, if indeed Ruiz has a future in boxing, because he talked in his post-fight interview about considering what's next for him. He's obviously at the tail end of his career either way, and lost to Fowler, who at the moment is domestic contender status, I guess, after his defeat to Scott Fitzgerald. So if Rose is losing to him, and he did lose clearly, he was a step behind for the majority of the fight, which belatedly sparked into life around maybe round 8 of 10. He's got to be considering whether boxing's right for him anymore. Maybe he should move into more of a trainer's role alongside other things. He's had a good career, world title challenger, former British champion as well. I think now may be the time to pack it in. He's got a young family, and we wouldn't like to see him become a trial horse or a journeyman up against prospects as they come through. Fowler, on the other hand, showed some small improvements from the Fitzgerald defeat, moved his head a bit more, and just generally fought a more disciplined fight. Took his time, picked Rose apart, but didn't get involved unnecessarily, and was well conditioned in the 10 rounds at a fair clip, to be fair. And he'll be looking, he really wants the Fitzgerald rematch. I don't know if that will happen anytime soon, but he's definitely on the domestic contention. Ted Cheeseman is still the British super welterweight champion after that draw recently with Kieran Conway, and he'll be looking ahead for kind of domestic belts towards the end of the year, you would think. So credit to him for the win, and also for Dave Coldwell for keeping him in the gym. Not that Fowler needs much encouragement, he's an ardent trainer, but also for finding those little nuances, those little margins where he can improve. He was an Olympian, of course, and if he relies a bit more on his skill going forward than his fighting heart, I think it will serve him well. Also on the show, we saw Jack Cullen retain his English middleweight title over John Harding Jr. Harding Jr. was stopped late in the fight, but gave it everything he had. I think he's won some new fans in defeat, really put his heart on his sleeve and left it all in the ring. But Cullen was just too tall, too rangy, and too clever with his timing as well. He's someone who, with his physical advantages over most opponents at middleweight, looks like he could go further. Big shock on the card in Liverpool. Sean McGoldrick, recent Olympian, lost his unbeaten record to someone he was expected to beat fairly easily in Thomas Asomba. Asomba, really good fighter, only loses to the best. I think he's only been stopped by Jay Harris, who's a phenomenal fighter in his own right. He just did a bit too much. He was clever on the inside. He bustled. He worked. McGoldrick just seemed a little bit one-paced, didn't have enough ideas, and he's lost his unbeaten record. Don't know how much he was affected by head trainer Jamie Moore being over in Philadelphia with Cole Frampton. Nigel Travis has proved an able deputy for some of Moore's other fighters in the past in the corner, so I don't think you can blame that. Also picking up really facile wins on the undercard were Robbie Davis Jr. and Lewis Ritson, super lightweight. They seem to be on a collision course for Davis Jr.'s British and European crowns, probably sometime in October. I think October the 19th in Newcastle has been mooted as the date and venue for that one. They had a bit of an altercation backstage between their fights. I think it was after Ritson's and before Davis Jr.'s. Hellish insults were exchanged. Maggot, mug, I think, were flying around. Sorry if there's any kids watching. Obviously, it's a bit profane. But yeah, Davis Jr., after his win, was howling like a wolf, howling out Ritson's name, if you can imagine that. If not, watch it on YouTube. Definitely wants that fight. But then when in his post-fight interview, he seemed to backtrack from that and say he was looking at other avenues. But I think, yeah, October 19th, not quite locked in yet, but it's looking very, very likely. We also saw Michael Conlan make another homecoming to Belfast for the Fowler and Fabal Festival, which 10,000 people packed out Falls Road in Belfast, right near where Conlan grew up, and he took a really good win over probably the toughest opponent on paper, at least, of his career so far, Diego Alberto Ruiz. Stopped him late in the fight, pounded him throughout, dominant display from Conlan. Now we've got to look at whether he's ready for kind of fringe world contender level and who that could be against. Not quite sure he's ready for a world title shot just yet, although his rankings with the alphabet bodies might make that likely. We think he probably needs, or I think he needs, a couple more seasoning fights first. But it was a great show. Paddy Gallagher wasn't happy with his result on the show. He was challenging Chris Jenkins for the British Welterweight Championship. Very, very close fight as it was expected to be. But unfortunately for Gallagher, he got a bad, Jenkins, the champion, got a bad cut. It was stopped, went to the cards, and he was just behind, even though he dropped Jenkins earlier in the fight, and the momentum seemed to be with him. You can watch our interview with Paddy Gallagher post-fight on our YouTube channel now. He was not happy with the result, to say the least. So that was really, really good event in Belfast. And over in the States, in Brooklyn, we saw a couple of interesting results. Most interesting of which was Jean Pascal turning back the clock to drop Marcus Browne 3 times and win a technical decision when Browne was cut too severely to continue. Pascal completely written off by most people. He seemed to be a bit of a measuring stick against prospects and contenders in recent times. But that's the biggest win he's had in a number of years. And he'll now be looking for another world title shot. Browne, on the other hand, apparently there was a rematch clause which he plans to invoke. He's obviously not happy with how the fight ended, and he'll be looking to come back. You know, he could have still won it on points if it had carried on, but the cut was really, really bad. Also on that show, we saw a heavyweight brawl that apparently set a new record for number of punches thrown, and it kind of a thumb in the eye to people that say you have to be body beautiful to be a good heavyweight boxer, because it was Adam Kovnatski against Chris Arreola, neither of whom are going to be winning any pin-up awards anytime soon. But they threw a humongous amount of shots. Great, great brawl. Kovnatski always a little bit ahead, the younger, fresher guy, not a big surprise. But Arreola showed he's still got a fair bit left in the tank as well. So if you can catch any of that on YouTube or on TV, I'd advise you to watch it. Good fight. And Kovnatski will now be looking probably at a world title shot. He's been rumoured to fight someone like Deontay Wilder in the past anyway, but now he's got that win over Arreola. I think next fight or 2 fights, he'll be looking for a really, really big contest. We want to know, obviously, what you think as well. What was the best performance of the weekend and why? What was your best fight to watch of the weekend as well? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll let you know what we think of your answers. We'll be back next week for Reflections, 4:30 p.m. Monday, as usual. But we'll also be here Thursday, 4:30 for FlexPectations, where we look ahead to the weekend's action. As always, thanks for your time, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.